A new boss at the Pentagon again. Good morning, everyone. I'm Maria Bartiromo. Welcome to Sunday Morning Futures. President Obama taps Ashton Carter. I will ask John McCain, set to become the next chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, why defense secretaries never stay very long in this administration. My two-part interview moments away. Then, how high can the stock market climb? Will there be a sell-off in 2015? A pioneer in the hedge fund industry is ahead. Julian Robertson on that and a lot more. Plus, it's happening, folks. Gasoline prices have fallen below $2 a gallon in at least one major city. But what's been a boon to our wallets could put a stop to some high-paying jobs. Our panel takes on the pros and cons of plummeting oil prices as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures. Well, last week, just as President Obama was announcing the nomination of Ashton Carter as his next defense secretary, I had the opportunity to speak with Senator John McCain. We'll get to my exclusive interview with the senator in a moment. But first, who is Ashton Carter? Fox News senior correspondent Eric Shawn joins us with that angle. Good morning to you, Eric.
Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everyone. Forget facing Vladimir Putin or the Iranians. The real challenge for Ashton Carter is standing up to Valerie Jarrett and Susan Rice.
Now, with a record of service that has spanned more than 30 years as a public servant, as an advisor, as a scholar, Ash is rightly regarded as one of our nation's foremost national security leaders.
Well, he apparently wasn't the first choice, but Ash Carter said yes and vows to give his 2 cents to the president straight.
If confirmed in this job, I pledge to you my most candid strategic advice. And I pledge also that you will receive equally candid military advice.
Carter is 60 years old, a Rhodes Scholar, Yale graduate with degrees in physics and medieval history. He may have to rely on the latter when confronting the threat of the radical Islamic terrorists of ISIS, but his specialty for years has been nuclear arms. A Pentagon veteran, he rose to the number 2 spot as Deputy Defense Secretary under Leon Panetta. Carter is seen as an unusual and perhaps unorthodox selection. Will apparently have to push back against his own government before facing America's enemies. The reported infighting and micromanaging of our country's defense policy from the president's inner circle is said to have partly helped drive Carter's 3 predecessors out of the Pentagon. In fact, former Defense Secretary Robert Gates complained about the White House interference just last month.
I told the commanders, you get a call from the White House, you tell them to go to hell and call me.
Well, with Carter's nomination, the revolving door at the Pentagon may finally have stopped. But the bigger questions are these. Can he roll back Putin's brazen aggression against our ally Ukraine? Can he direct the final defeat of ISIS and the Taliban? And can he help stop Iran from having the ability to build a nuclear bomb? Maria?
All the right questions, Eric. Thank you. Now to my interview with Senator John McCain. Earlier, while I was traveling, I asked the senator about the president's choosing Ash Carter.
So to speak, and also I hope that Ash Carter, unfortunately, like his 3 predecessors in this 6-year period, understands that he has no influence on the overall strategic decisions or tactical decisions that generally the Secretary of Defense is made part of. Former Secretary Panetta and former Secretary Gates, and now you'll see now Secretary Hagel have been very, very strident in their dissatisfaction of being excluded from the decision-making process. It's in the hands of 3 or 4 people in the White House, and the result has been disastrous, in my opinion.
Well, Senator, I mean, you make really the right point. This will be the 4th defense secretary in 6 years. We know that there were others who the president wanted to tap for this job who actually said, no, I don't want the job. Why has it been so difficult for this administration to have a defense secretary in place for a sustained period?
Look, when you have the job of Secretary of Defense and managing the armed forces of the United States of America and being at the top of that pyramid, you expect to be included in the decision-making process that affects them and their use and their mission. I can assure you, I was on a panel with former Secretary Gates and former Secretary Panetta, both whom in many different venues have expressed their extreme frustration. We have people in the White House, just a handful of people who have no military experience, no background whatsoever. Their only credential is that they are close to the President of the United States. Frankly, in all my years of public service, I have never seen an arrangement this exclusive, with one exception, and that was during the Vietnam War, when targeting was actually taking place. The picking of targets in Vietnam were actually taking place in the Oval Office. This is really almost that bad.
Let me move on to some of the job that will be in front of him. Now, Secretary of State John Kerry said in Brussels this week that the U.S.'s efforts to destroy ISIS have begun to take effect in terms of degrading ISIS both in Syria and in Iraq. Do you agree with that?
Of course not. I'm sure there have been some slight gains. The fight over Kobani goes on with the full, what could be, it's not, but could be the full weight of American air power. The ISIS still controls a significant part of it. There's a little bit of back and forth, but there's no strategy. And therefore, there is sort of a hit and miss, decisions made on the fly, because there's no cohesive or coherent strategy to defeat ISIS. And among other things, they are treating ISIS as two different wars, one in Syria and one in Iraq. I guarantee you, ISIS doesn't treat it that way.
The president continues to be adamant in terms of saying no boots on the ground, in terms of destroying ISIS. Will this be effective, or will we eventually see boots on the ground?
Well, we've already seen boots on the ground, as you know. They just refuse to call them combat troops because they're in combat areas. I mean, it's a charade. And they'll be having to put more in. This will be the same kind of gradualism as I recall Vietnam. So there already are boots on the ground. They need more. We now have the world's most powerful Air Force doing pinprick strikes against empty buildings in many occasions, and that's because we have not got forward air controllers on the ground to identify these targets. One of the reasons why we haven't done better in Kobani, for example. But you know what's another thing that's morally unacceptable is we still refuse to provide defensive weapons to Ukrainians. This is after their country is being dismembered by Vladimir Putin. His troops are there. He's going to move further south, and he may even move to the west, while we refuse to give them weapons with which to defend themselves. You know what I'm told why? They don't want to provoke Vladimir Putin. I'm not making that up.
Senator, that's exactly where I was going next. I do not understand, and the public does not understand, why we are sending things like blankets and food to the Ukrainian army and military rather than armament.
I am told that it is because they don't want to further provoke Vladimir Putin. The guy is dismembering the country. The guy's people are responsible for the shoot down of an airliner. They have now does anybody talk about Crimea anymore? And of course, the recent reports from our head of NATO, General Breedlove, is that more troops and equipment from Russia have moved into eastern Ukraine as well, which, by the way, one of Putin's goals is to collapse the Ukrainian army. And by controlling eastern Ukraine, which is the industrial part of Ukraine, he certainly puts enormous strain on the Ukrainian economy. So to say to the Ukrainians, we're with you, the hundreds of thousands that gathered in the Maidan, the square in Kiev, that they wanted to be like the West, they wanted free of this kleptocracy and be governed by Russians, we've basically told them, no deal. Blankets don't do well against Russian tanks.
What should we expect from you, Senator, when you take up your new role, likely the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee in the new Congress?
Well, first we will have hearings. We need to repeal sequestration. We need to have a policy that drives the budget rather than a budget that drives the policy. And then we will also be going after this unacceptable waste and mismanagement in the Pentagon and the bloated bureaucracy there. But we will also be doing what is necessary to bring these issues to the forefront and use legislation. I'll be working closely with Senator Corker, the Foreign Relations Committee, and Senator Burr, who will be chairman of the Intelligence Committee. We're going to all work together. We're going to see if we can't force some of these policy changes that would make America strong and viable again, and emerge from the position of the greatest weakness that I have seen in my lifetime.
And we'll take a short break. Still ahead, stay with us. More with Senator McCain as I ask him about next week's budget deadline and will there be a government shutdown? I hope you'll follow me on Twitter @MariaBartiromo, @Sunday Futures. Our panel is ahead. Stay with us. Let us know what you'd like to hear from the panel as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures.